What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And Giants Nation, let's ride. Dangerous Wilson, Russell Wilson. We all know him. We all have our opinions on him. The Giants met with him. It was described as an exploratory meeting. Really nothing more than just a conversation, but it is worth noting that Dangerous Wilson met with the New York Giants this week before heading off to Pittsburgh for his next free agency meeting. It's going to be really interesting to see where Russell Wilson lands, but I guess the New York Giants now are an option. Maybe an option that we hadn't really thought of before. There wasn't a whole lot of conversation amongst Giants fans about Russell Wilson. I know I wrote an article about him last week, Alex. I texted you about him and was like, hey, maybe this is something that we should be monitoring. Well, here we are. Now we have to monitor it because Russell Wilson and the New York Giants have met, and there is at least some level of interest there. So we're going to go ahead and unpack that, discuss what this meeting means, what it could mean for the Giants' plans at quarterback this offseason, and how we would feel about Russell Wilson potentially being a target for the New York Giants in free agency. But before we dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss the episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you listen to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you feeling today, my friend? And what are your thoughts on the Giants having this exploratory conversation with Russell Wilson?
I'm doing pretty good, and this one kind of came out of left field today. The Giants being interested in bringing in Russell Wilson for a meeting before he went to Pittsburgh. Interesting discussion to have, and what the kind of implications would be of a Russell Wilson thing. I'm going to throw out some ideas. Some of them may not make a lot of sense. Some of them may make sense, depending on who you ask. But Russell Wilson, basically the way that this operates, and let's quell one concern that some people may have. Russell Wilson is going to count next to nothing to acquire. Some people on Twitter think that we're paying Russell Wilson $20 million. Guys, let's get one thing straight. The Denver Broncos are paying for his contract, right? The Giants don't actually have to pay anything. Any contract that anyone gives Russell Wilson is automatically taken from the money that the Denver Broncos owe him, because they basically cut him to just get him off the team. They just ate like $80 million in dead money or some ridiculous number. So whatever contract he gets is really not being paid by the team that gets him. It's really for him, it's more so, where do I want to go? So either I can win now, or I can leverage it into another deal that I can get paid a little bit more, and then, create the legacy of whatever millions of dollars he already has. Just keep building on top of it. If you're the Giants, why would you bring Russell Wilson in? Well, there's a couple reasons, right? To compete straight up with Daniel Jones. Be like, Russ, like, we think you're a good player still. Are you going to come in? And if we bring you in, you will have the opportunity to take that job from Daniel Jones and not let it go. Daniel Jones may not be ready for week 1 of the 2024 regular season. The Giants want a player that's going to come in and make an impact immediately. But look, if Russ comes in and plays really well week 1, why would you go back to Daniel Jones? You know what I mean? Like, what's the point? You might as well use Russ as this bridge quarterback, whatever it might be. And there's another argument here that, well, what if the Giants draft a quarterback? And what if they let him sit for a year behind Russell Wilson and Daniel Jones, and they could make Daniel Jones or the rookie quarterback inactive? They don't need to carry 3 quarterbacks. One of them is inactive. They just learn, basically be Jordan Love-like type of year. You just let them build, grow behind the scenes, and get ready for the future. You don't have to throw them into the fire immediately behind a unit that has not had a good offensive line for years. We just don't know what they're going to look like. Situate the foundation and then inject the quarterback when the timing is right. Russell Wilson gives you a chance to win while you're doing that, but also help develop a quarterback behind the scenes, learning from a Super Bowl winner, learning from a guy like that. And look, if the Giants go with J.J. McCarthy, I'm pretty sure he's a man of faith or whatever it might be. So is Russell Wilson. Maybe they have something in common there. They can learn. I'm just throwing out crazy ideas like there, but I do think that is something that could be seen as a correlation between the two guys. They are, if not spiritual, definitely religious. So maybe there is something there that they can bond over. Now, a lot of people will say Russell Wilson's crazy. A lot of people will say, he was awful last year and, he hasn't been great. But the Denver Broncos were a very bad team for a lot of reasons that were not named Russell Wilson. Their defense fell apart. Their coaching situation was really, really questionable. A lot of scheme problems. They're overhauling a lot right now. So, Anthony, looking at what Russell Wilson brings to the table, what in favor do you have? We'll talk about the pros of bringing him in, and then we'll talk about the cons after that. But I think there's a lot of pros to considering bringing in Wilson just to at least win some football games next year while you develop a young rookie quarterback who may not be ready to take over center stage in New York.
Sure, sure. Pro number one, he's healthy. He can start week one. Daniel Jones is not as healthy as Russell Wilson. Daniel Jones will miss time, whether you're talking OTAs or training camp or any of those practices in the summer. He's not going to be at 100% health and strength for those practices. So he's going to be missing time while this offense is trying to install this game plan. And of course, with a new offensive line coach coming in, Alex, they're installing new blocking schemes. That's something that you do need to keep in mind here, is that the Giants quarterback having continuity from practice during the summer into the regular season, a little bit more important this year because it's not a one-to-one transition. It's not like you're just carrying over the 2023 offensive game plan into 2024. There are going to be changes, whether they're subtle or not. They are changes, and the quarterback, of course, Daniel Jones is going to be preparing for those changes, going to be studying them, taking note of them, all that stuff. But live reps, practice, getting in there and actually meeting these coaches and working with them and starting to walk through some of these new changes to the offensive game plan. Daniel Jones isn't ready to do all of those things while they're being done. He's not going to be ready until probably midway through training camp, maybe at the preseason. I doubt he plays at the preseason. That will ultimately depend on his health. And while Daniel Jones believes he's going to be ready for week one, and I think there's a good chance that he is, there's also a good chance that he isn't. So Russell Wilson is healthier, and that's a big pro. You can have a quarterback that will be present for all of those practices and training activities and be ready for the start of the regular season. That's a huge pro for the New York Giants because looking at this team, they don't want to get themselves in a hole early. Think about this team in 2023. What a slow start to the season, 1-2, but then they ended up what was it, 1-6 or something? Having that slow start to the year and getting themselves in a hole, the 3-game winning streak towards the end, the 3-4 finish at the end, whatever it was. It wasn't enough. They couldn't get out of that hole, even though they had a solid second half or finish to the season. All that losing that they did in the beginning of the year really put a damper on their season and prevented them from being a competitive team. So with Russell Wilson stepping in, being ready in week one, having done all the OTAs and everything, they can be competitive from the start of the season. They don't have to wait for Daniel Jones to get healthy and have some backup step in there until he's healthy. Or they don't have to worry about Daniel Jones being a little bit rusty because, listen, guys, he hasn't played football in a while. Yes, he's throwing, but he's throwing in a chair right now. He's not putting pressure still on his knee and not running yet. So he's going to be rusty even at the start of the regular season. Those are all factors that the Giants have to consider. And notice I haven't even brought up a rookie quarterback into this conversation yet because it's more than that. It's just about getting a quarterback healthy and ready to play on the field in week one. Russell Wilson is your better option compared to Daniel Jones. And if you want to take it further and talk about who is the better player, if you're going to go ahead and comment and say Daniel Jones is a better player than Russell Wilson right now, I'm going to yell at you because you're going to say that Russell Wilson had a bad 2023 season, and I'm going to say he threw Daniel Jones' career high in passing touchdowns in this bad season. That tells you everything you need to know to me. And I know that there's more to it than just stats, but if you want to take a look at the analytics, dive deeper, you're going to find that Russell Wilson has been the better quarterback over the past 2 seasons than Daniel Jones. 2022, I'd argue Daniel Jones was better. Russell finished with 15 touchdowns, 11 picks, or 16 touchdowns rather. Worst season of his career by far. Also was sacked 55 times, a league high. So that goes into this. And plus, he was playing under Nathaniel Hackett, who is arguably the worst head coach that's ever coached a team in NFL history. So obviously, we saw a little bit better play from Russell Wilson in 2023. 7-8 record. Again, the 26 touchdowns, only 8 picks. He's not his old self. This is not the Russell Wilson from the glory days in the Seattle Seahawks when he went to 9 Pro Bowls and won a Super Bowl. This is not the same player. But if you're talking about getting a quality starter in there who can compete for 17 games, give you a 7-8 record, something competitive, Russell Wilson's still capable of doing that, being competitive and being at least good enough. And I think that is a fine baseline for the Giants to try and secure in free agency. Plus, one of the things that you mentioned, Alex, he's cheap. Russell Wilson is willing to play on the veteran minimum this season because he's getting so much money still from the Denver Broncos. He's willing to play for the absolute veteran minimum contract. That's a serious luxury for the Giants. We've been talking, Alex, about resetting the quarterback window, going cheaper at that position so that you could spend money elsewhere. Russell Wilson is literally the cheapest option on the salary cap that you can find. And I think that's a big selling point for him. Wherever he wants to go, he's looking to go to a team that's going to be a good situation for him, that's going to result in wins. And the argument that I made to you, Alex, a little while ago was that this New York Giants team was really a quarterback away from being in the playoffs. I've brought this up a few times on the show. There's like 3 plays that you can point to. One against the Jets, had that play been converted by a good quarterback, they win that game. One against the Rams, converted, they win. One against the Bills. So those are 3 games, and because they beat the Packers, they would have had the tiebreaker over the Packers with the same record. Those 3 plays do get made by Russell Wilson. And honestly, because Russell Wilson was as good as he was last year, which wasn't great, but it was good, more than good enough, because of that level of play, had he been the Giants starting quarterback, yes, they probably do make it into the postseason. Now, how far do they go? Is it worth it making there? Okay, different conversation. But there is something to be said about the potential of Russell Wilson at this stage in his career trying to reignite the flame, get back to the playoffs, and working under Brian Daboll, who is a great quarterback coach. I think there's something to be said about that. So there are definitely pros to this equation, and I've mentioned a few so far, and Alex, I haven't even touched on the big one that you alluded to. How about mentoring that rookie quarterback? How about having a bridge? No pressure on this rookie to step in there and play too soon. That's one of the issues that I have with considering Daniel Jones to be a bridge. If Daniel Jones starts playing poorly, a very large and loud portion of the fan base is going to say, pull him out of the lineup, let's see what the rookie has. If Russell Wilson is on this team and he's the starting quarterback and he's playing just okay, the fans are going to be okay with that because they know, all right, you're getting average, good enough quarterback play, but you still have this rookie developing behind. There's less pressure to pull Russell Wilson out of the starting lineup than there is to pull Daniel Jones out of the starting lineup, in my opinion. I think that Daniel Jones has a much shorter leash, and I think that you can have more comfortability for this rookie quarterback as he sits and develops with Russell Wilson starting than you would with Daniel Jones starting. So that's another one of these factors in this equation that I really like, is just that you can have patience with this rookie quarterback. There's no rush. There's no need to pull your starter from the lineup. You can literally just sit back, let that rookie develop, let Russell Wilson go out there, do whatever he needs to do, and hopefully, you win some games down the stretch. And when that rookie quarterback is ready, whether it be in the final stretch of the season or if it be next season, then he takes over. But there's no pressure and no rush when you have a guy like Russell Wilson available in your starting lineup. So a lot of pros to this. I think that's something, this is a move that many Giants fans are going to overlook. They're going to scoff at, and I get it in some respect because we're about to dive into some of the cons, which is important to recognize, but there are a lot of pros. This is an upgrade at the quarterback position for the New York Giants if they sign Russell Wilson. Make no doubt about it. This is an upgrade, and it also gives them a lot of long-term flexibility to develop a rookie quarterback, which is a huge selling point here. But now, talking about some of these cons, Alex, one of the things that I do have to mention, why would Russell Wilson want to come to the New York Giants? Is this even a real possibility? In my opinion, no, it's not much of a possibility because I think that there are more attractive destinations for him. I would argue the Las Vegas Raiders, new coach Antonio Pierce, it's really exciting over there. He could throw to Devontae Adams. He's got some weapons over there. Jacoby Myers is good too. It's a more attractive destination. How about the Pittsburgh Steelers, who he's meeting with today? They just made the playoffs last year. Mike Tomlin is one of the best head coaches in the NFL, maybe even in the history of the NFL, if you really want to dive that deep into it with Mike Tomlin. They have a stacked defense. They have 2 receivers who are very capable of making plays, George Pickens and Deontay Johnson, if they go ahead and keep him. They do have talent, Pat Freiermuth as well. So you're looking at some of these other landing spots for Russell Wilson. They're more attractive than the New York Giants. The main selling point for the Giants is the fact that A, it's New York, B, you have Brian Daboll, and I think that's really it, honestly. And they are a year removed from being a playoff team, so you can argue that getting that team back into the playoffs could be huge for Russell Wilson's legacy. But looking at those other destinations, Alex, I think that they make more sense for him, which is why ultimately I think that it's a good conversation to have about Russell Wilson, but it's a very unlikely outcome to the free agency period. But how do you feel about that kind of Russell Wilson having more attractive landing spots? And overall, what are some of the other cons that you might see in potentially signing Russell Wilson?
Well, the potential cons is that it kind of, like, assuming you get Russell Wilson, the chances of you taking a quarterback probably decreases because you're really bringing him in to win football games for you now and, play, maybe really actively compete with Daniel Jones and really kind of tell the story. If Daniel Jones loses the job to Russell Wilson, you guarantee that you're taking the out in his contract, right? So if you bring in Russell Wilson, the con is you probably then forfeit the idea of taking a quarterback in terms of probability. It also pushes this problem into the future, right? You're like, all right, like we still need a quarterback. We still need to figure this thing out. But for what it's worth, Anthony, I think Russell Wilson's a perfect fit for our offensive scheme. You know what I mean? His deep ball phenomenal. Like one of the best deep balls out there, some of the best touch out there. If the Giants reinforce their offensive line significantly, right? If they're like, yeah, like we're just not going to be in range to get a quarterback, and they go with Russell Wilson, who will probably win and keep the starting quarterback job at a veteran minimum price, you can now say to yourself, well, damn, like maybe we just keep him, reinvest a ton of money and draft capital, because you're going to add, theoretically, if you stay at 6, you're going to add a Malik Neighbors to your offense. You have all this second-round draft capital to continue adding to your team. You have a solid quarterback in Wilson who's going to be objectively better. You have a better offensive line with Brasil's a better coach than Bobby Johnson, with better offensive line talent because you're adding someone in free agency most likely. The bad thing is that you kind of push this quarterback problem into the future. Who's going to be the future of this team at the position? You're going into next year with a draft class that is mostly considered below average. Things could happen, things could change, but you kind of forfeit the youth of the perspective, but I still don't think it's a terrible idea to draft a quarterback, sit them for a year, use Drones as a bridge, and then move on into the future with a young guy that's going to cost you next to nothing in contrast with Jones's salary this year. So it's a really good secondary option. It's an alternative. However, the Giants don't have a lot of time to decide on the alternative. Someone's going to sign Russell Wilson soon. The Steelers are a playoff team, right? They get themselves a good quarterback, they're going to be able to make some noise next year. There are a couple clubs that could go out and get Russ and make a little bit of a move. The Giants were a couple of plays away from being a playoff team this past season. Like you said, Russ may have been the difference between playoffs and not playoffs. For the Giants, if you spend a couple of draft picks, you reinforce the team, you have a lot of money to spend. Who's to say the Giants aren't in a spot where Russ could actually propel them to a playoff appearance next year? So it's a possibility. I'm not going to say it's a probability, but considering what we have, it's not the worst alternative. And I'll throw this out there and I'll get your take on this. Because he's looking for a veteran minimum deal, if the Giants a couple months from now, signed Russell Wilson, said you're going to have a chance to compete with Daniel Jones, and they drafted a quarterback and they're like, well, this quarterback is beating out Russell Wilson in camp, they can always cut Russell Wilson and basically have no money, no dead money. Like they can, of course, it'd be kind of an asshole move to cut him over after saying like you have a chance to win the job. But if he just is washed, then a rookie comes in and outperforms him, you cut him and have no financial commitments to him. It's basically one, done, gone. He can go sign with anybody else and he's another quarterback, right? So the financial commitment is not a play here. It's not actually a problem. It's more so like giving him a chance to win the job. If he loses the job, that's on him. You know what I mean? Like, you'll have a chance to win it, but if you lose it, we're going to cut you for a rookie quarterback if he performs better than you, which, if we're being quite honest with you, it probably doesn't happen. But again, you never know. So I'll get your take on that. The thoughts of like, yeah, bring him in, like sign him. He would compete for the starting job now, protect you long-term, be a better mentor than Daniel Jones would likely be based on just overall talent and experience and knowing what winning a Super Bowl is like. And at the same time, if it doesn't work out, if he doesn't perform well, if a guy beats him out, you can cut him and save all, like you're not losing any money. You're basically cutting him for next to nothing, $1 million. So it's really not a big deal financially for the Giants. I think that would be the primary narrative I kind of hone in on right now.
It's a low-risk move. Signing Russell Wilson is a low risk. Again, I just think the biggest factor to this equation is whether or not he wants to play for the New York Giants over some of these other destinations. However, I will mention one thing, and it kind of ties into what you're saying. It's a low-risk move because you're signing him to that veteran minimum deal, right? Because that's the report, is that he's willing to play at that veteran minimum. But what if the Giants do this? What if they say, okay, so you're willing to play veteran minimum for the Raiders, for the Steelers, for some of these other teams. Why don't we give you $10 million? Something cheap. That's cheap enough for the Giants. Maybe it's incentive-laden. Maybe they give him a deal that's more than the veteran minimum, but it's still not a lot. And it's enough to say, okay, well, you know what? Maybe I can just bring in a little bit more money, go to a little bit less favorable of a situation, get paid a bit more. Maybe, there are some pros to the Giants situation that I do like. I think that's something to consider, Alex. Of course, we'd like to have him on the veteran minimum. But if the Giants are like, okay, well, we really do want to sign Russell Wilson. We know he's willing to take the veteran minimum elsewhere. The only way that we can convince him to come here, we got to throw him some cash. So let's allocate a little bit of this salary cap towards him. And then you're not talking about veteran minimum. You're talking about a few more million. And then, yeah, maybe you're not cutting him at the end of training camp if it doesn't pan out. Maybe it's, that's no longer part of the conversation. But now you have Russell Wilson for the season. You secured the quarterback that you think can be your starter for 17 games and be an upgrade over Daniel Jones and be healthy. So I think that's another way that this could shape out if the Giants do land Russell Wilson. There's going to be a lot of conversation about, he's going to go for the veteran minimum. That's what he wants to play for. That's fine. And all these teams are going to try and sign him for that. But I do think that, as this continues to develop, as he talks to more teams, there might be a little bit more competitive of a market out there for him than we realize. So he might actually end up getting some sort of a contract above the veteran minimum. And again, I think that would be the way that the New York Giants end up signing him. But I don't think it would be too expensive. I said the number 10 million, it could be 5 million, it could be 15. I don't really know what it's going to be. It's going to depend on how competitive this market gets for Russell Wilson. But if they really want to sweeten the pot for him and say, hey, walk away from those better situations, come to our situation, we want you, we need you, it's really going to be about giving him probably a little bit of a financial incentive to walk away from those other top destinations. And I think that's something that, the Giants could consider doing. But I do like the point that you bring up, Alex. I think that's a great point to mention, is that this is a very low risk move. Even if you're signing him to a very cheap contract, whether you're talking veteran minimum or $5 million incentive laden deal, you can cut him at the end of training camp if it's just not going to work out. If maybe you draft Jaden Daniels or Drake May, and at training camp they're lighting it up, they look like superstars, you're like, screw this, that's our week 1 starter, we don't want to mess around, we just want to get this guy on the field, then go ahead. You can cut Russell Wilson. He could try and find a backup job for the regular season somewhere else. It's totally possible. But I do think the most likely scenario here is he winds up with another team unless the Giants sweeten the pot a little bit with a financial incentive. Alex, what do you think about that? Because again, the narrative here is that you could sign him for the veteran minimum, so there's no risk involved. You could just kind of bring in this guy. As there becomes more competition in this market, would you be open to throwing him a little bit of money? Do you even think that would make a difference to Russell Wilson? Do you think he just doesn't care about it at this point? How do you kind of feel about maybe the Giants could sign him to a cheap 1-year deal that's not exactly the veteran minimum?
I don't think money's a problem for Russ. I think he's getting all his guarantees from the Broncos either way. So for him, I think it's more about going to a situation where he's going to have a chance to win, but the team is also going to be reinvesting in the offense and being a good team. And look, the Pittsburgh Steelers are a really good, kind of team to consider here that need a quarterback. I mean, or at least someone to compete with Kenny Pickett. And, obviously Kenny Pickett's not looking so hot these days. I think that could be a good option for them. Other teams like the Cleveland Browns, let him compete with Deshaun Watson. They have an elite defense, good offensive weapons. The Browns make a lot of sense to me as a team that could, bring him in and cheap, and he would probably have a chance to make a push at a playoff appearance, if not more than that, this upcoming season. I don't think the Colts, because I think they want to give Anthony Richardson that opportunity. The Titans could make sense. Obviously they have Will Levi, but, we'll see how they go there. The Raiders make a lot of sense, but I think Antonio Pierce has his ideas of what he wants to do at quarterback as possible. They can go in a direction of a player like that. Other teams that make sense. I mean, the Falcons make a lot of sense. They want a quarterback, but one of these teams, and to be quite honest with you, if I'm Russell Wilson, I actually may consider waiting until after the draft to sign with a team, because a team that signs him now, could end up cutting him because they end up taking a quarterback in the draft. If you're the Falcons, you go get Russell Wilson, and they end up getting like J.J. McCarthy or Jake May, depending on how the draft unfolds, they're going to want to give those reps to their rookie, not Russell Wilson. So I think there could be some logic behind him waiting after the draft, seeing the team that doesn't get the quarterback. Like, for example, the Vikings, playing with Justin Jefferson. There's so many options here that could unfold. Like, the team that doesn't get their free agent of choice. There's not that many great starting quarterbacks in free agency aside from Kirk Cousins, who's coming off the big injury. So right now I kind of feel like it might be in his best interest to find out which team is best suited to win after the draft, and not right now if that's his priority. Which is why maybe he's going through all these meetings now, trying to gauge which team is looking to get a quarterback, which team is looking to do something there or here. Who knows? Maybe he'll probably sign earlier, but I get why he would maybe consider waiting. What are your thoughts on that in terms of just waiting to see the team that is most likely to win after the draft? Because free agency, it changes stuff, but the draft could really change a lot depending on what teams get quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think it's good that you brought that up, but I do think he's going to end up signing probably at the start of free agency so that a team can kind of plan to build around him. And he'll know that, of course, a rookie quarterback is going to be in the cards for most of these teams that he's signing with. But there are teams that he can go to that leverages him in a better position to kind of fend off some of those rookies. Like if he does go to the Giants and then they do trade up and they draft Drake May, or Drake May falls to their lap, or Jaden Daniels, whoever it is, then okay, so this isn't the cleanest situation for me. There is pressure to perform. There is somebody behind me who wants my job. But if he goes to, let's say, the Raiders, who end up taking maybe a Bo Nix later on, or, a Michael Penix, somebody in round 2, okay, they want this guy to wait and develop. Like, there's no rush to get this guy on the field. I'm safe. So, again, that's why I think it's very important that Russell Wilson's going to pick his situation carefully. So that's why the New York Giants, again, it makes sense in many ways for the Giants to sign Russell Wilson, but does it make sense for Russell Wilson to sign with the New York Giants? This was just a preliminary conversation. Again, they didn't really have a formal meeting. It wasn't a free agent visit or anything. It was just an exploratory conversation. Would he be interested in signing there? For all we know, they had this exploratory conversation. Both parties walked away from it and said, nah, not interested. Totally possible. Maybe we're adding too much fuel to the fire here, but I do think it's worth talking about because, again, one of the main takeaways here is that the Giants are in the quarterback market. If you didn't believe it before, you have to unequivocally believe it now. The Giants are looking for quarterback options, whether you think that's so that they can have a starter in week 1 in case Daniel Jones is injured, or if you think it's because they're looking to move on from Daniel Jones. They are firmly in the quarterback market, as we've been hearing from a lot of the national and beat reporters. But yeah, I think that there's something to be said about waiting until after the draft to sign if you're Russell Wilson. I think that there's also pros to signing as soon as possible so a team can properly plan and build around you, build the offense around you. There's pros and cons to everything here with Russell Wilson and his situation, but again, it's really going to be about him hand-picking the best situation for him. He's going to have a number of teams that are interested, a few suitors. I'm sure he's going to visit, I know we said the Steelers, the Raiders, maybe he ends up visiting with the Patriots. And honestly, that's another part of this that we didn't talk about, Alex. That would be huge for the New York Giants if Russell Wilson visited with and signed with the New England Patriots. If he signs with the Patriots can feel comfortable saying, okay, let's go playmaker at number 3, or let's trade down from number 3. Let's go with a quarterback in round 2, or just, stick it out with Russell Wilson for a year. That's totally possible. I think that's what Giants fans should be open for here, is that Russell Wilson signs with the New England Patriots. So the Giants, if you want a quarterback, you can move up to number 3 and go ahead and get a Drake or a Jaden or a McCarthy, possibly, if you want McCarthy to sit behind a bridge for a year. That's another part of this that we'll continue to dive into in future episodes. But Alex, how do you feel about that? Before we wrap up here, I want to throw that scenario out there. Russell Wilson doesn't sign with the Giants, signs with the New England Patriots. I feel like that could have a pretty big domino effect on the NFL draft that ultimately has a massive impact on the New York Giants.
Yeah, look, we're hearing tons of different rumors every single day. J.J. McCarthy's ahead of Drake May. Drake May could fall to 6. It's, sure, absolutely. If you want to give Brian Dable Drake May, please do it, NFL. I would be so happy with that. But, we're hearing so many different conflicting reports. This person saying that, this person has grades here. This is one of the drafts that I really just have no idea what's going to happen. I think mostly, it's hard to guess, hard to make an estimation of what's going to go down. But I've never been more confused at where this draft is going to go for many teams. You know what I mean? I've never been more I don't know where Drake May or J.J. McCarthy land in this draft. I think that Jaden Daniels and then you have other people saying Jaden Daniels is not as good as people think, and it's just hard to say. I think Caleb Williams is the consensus number 1. He's going first overall, unless a blockbuster Bears trade were to go down. But I think Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and J.J. McCarthy, maybe people think that they're a lot closer than some people believe. And, who knows? I'm just saying it because all these analysts are saying different things every single day. So if the Patriots decided, let's move back, go get Russell Wilson, restock for the future, I get it. But at the same time, the Patriots are not in a spot to win, right? The Raiders, I could see being in a spot to win. You basically are giving Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs, if you were to bring him back, with a decent offensive line, to Russell Wilson with a good defense and Antonio Pierce, who knows how to rally the troops. I would love to see that for Antonio Pierce. That would be a good combo for them. I just don't think the Patriots are the right spot for Russ, and I think he probably would identify the same thing. It's possible. It's possible he would do that, but that would definitely be a telling story for the Patriots if they were to get that deal done. I kind of feel like he should wait until after the draft to see what teams need quarterbacks, and then probably go to a better spot where he knows that they reinvested in the offense or the defense, or corrected some weaknesses. If he wants to win, he's got to figure out the best place to go to win. After the draft is probably when you can make a better determination of that. But who knows? We'll see what happens. I definitely think a cheap flyer on Russell Wilson to compete with Daniel Jones is objectively a great move. if the Giants don't plan on drafting a rookie quarterback to take over this upcoming season.
Sure, and I think it's a good move even if they do decide to draft a quarterback early. I mean, listen, Daniel Jones is such a wild card. I think that you have to plan for the season as if he's not ready for week one, just because if you plan for him to be ready for week one and he isn't, you leave yourself a little bit screwed over. So it's a big wild card, but all the reasons that you just mentioned there, Alex, about signing before the draft, after the draft, and the factors involved, that's why I think the Pittsburgh Steelers just make so much sense for him. I don't think that they're in the market to draft a quarterback. If they sign Russell Wilson, Kenny Pickett can just kind of sit there for a year and grow behind Russell and then maybe try again next year. That just seems like the perfect scenario for both Russell Wilson and the Steelers. But who knows, man? The New York Giants are now involved with this. So we had to talk about it, and we had to give you guys our takeaways. And I again think that this could have a domino effect on the NFL, on the NFL draft, on the New York Giants, depending on where Russell Wilson ends up. And for what it's worth, we are only a couple days now, Alex, from the legal tampering period. Where does Kirk Cousins go? Where does he sign? Maybe he signs with New England, and that's a huge shakeup for the NFL draft. So it's going to be exciting. And Baker Mayfield, it's expected that he re-signs with Tampa Bay. What if he goes to the Falcons or Minnesota and Kirk Cousins lands up in Atlanta? There's just so many different possibilities now. Russell Wilson being one of these dominoes to fall, a lot of dominoes are left to fall, and they're all going to have a bit of an impact on the New York Giants. So as our coverage continues to be more NFL-based rather than just Giants-based, I hope you guys appreciate that we can look at the NFL and then examine how it affects the New York Giants, these different moves around the league. And it's very important to always keep your finger on the pulse here and take a look at all 32 teams if you're really trying to study what's going on with the New York Giants. And of course, we're going to continue to update you on everything about the Giants and free agency, the draft, rumors, speculation, all of it right here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you listen to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.